Katie, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks.
I've been wanting to talk about polyamory on this podcast. Well, how long have I been doing this podcast? Over 2 years. So over 2 years. And I finally found the right guest to have on, and I'm super excited.
Yeah, great. Thanks. I'm excited to be here.
My first question that I like to ask everyone that really doesn't have much to do with their story, but as a way to let everyone know that, like, sure, you can go through a lot of big shifts in your life, but we're kind of going through like daily shifts and changes and setbacks all the time. So my question to you is, what's happened recently in maybe this week or this month that's kind of either getting you down or setting you back in some way?
That's a good question.
That's the one that you can't prepare for.
Yeah. Let's see, I guess.
Or even any wins. Talk on the other side of it.
Well, I think it's kind of a combination. I'm learning to be much kinder and gentler with myself. Like, it feels like some days I feel like the things I want to manifest are taking forever, and I'm wondering why. And I'm taking, as I have been for years, all kinds of like group coaching programs, embodiment programs. And sometimes when things aren't happening at the timeline that I wish they were, I find it really easy to go into thoughts about how it's because I should be doing more. I should have a more consistent practice in my morning meditations, and I should be doing more. And even like I should be resting more. And I find myself kind of like taking on the responsibility for like why things aren't working out the way I want them to. Like, I'm either blaming myself or much more rarely kind of blaming the outside universe. And I tend to be kind of hard on myself. And lately I've been transitioning and realizing that things take as long as they take.
Yeah.
And like, I am God. And sometimes I want to look up at the heavens and be like, what is taking so long? Or I want to like look in at myself and be like, oh, these are all the reasons it's taking so long. But the reality is that like, I am God in a body, and in this 3D reality, things take time, and it's okay. And so I'm really trying to look at myself with the gentleness and generosity that I find so easy to give to other people, and really turn that towards myself.
We're recording this podcast at a time where we are swarmed by, we're not doing enough. And as we go into the new year, we need to do more, do more, do more. But it brings up a great topic of doing versus being. And I find I get caught up in the doer mentality as well. Love a to-do list, love a checklist. And I find a lot of the times when I finish off that to-do list, I still feel pretty empty at the end of the day. So, I mean, doing more isn't really solving anything in my opinion.
Yeah. And sometimes I think for a lot of us, it's distracting us from the really deep work of like actually just being with ourselves, which is really hard to do.
I'm an expert on it. Trust me. I could write a book on doing as a form of avoiding. Like, I do it all the time.
Yeah. I come from a long line of people who work hard and find a lot of virtue in hard work.
Accomplishments.
And I'm finding how much avoidance is actually wrapped up in all of that.
I love that you use the phrase wrapped up. I have no intentions on unpacking that and unwrapping. Not yet. It's too scary. And it's because I don't have the time to take the time to unwrap it. And I think that's very relatable to a lot of people. And it's scary. Like, the unraveling will be ridiculous.
Yeah. I've been doing the unraveling, and it's pretty wild. It's yeah. It's almost like once it starts, like, where does it go and where does it end? And I sort of feel like maybe never. And maybe that's part of like the exciting thing about being a human in this time. But wow, it's a lot. It's a roller coaster ride for sure.
I want to jump into your story a bit. And when I initially chatted with you, I feel like we did a really nice chronological part of the story where I feel like everything with polyamory started for you when you broke up with a boyfriend, kind of without much reason, but like, you broke up with him and then you kind of sat back and you're like, but I still love him, but I still ended that relationship. If you want to talk to that a bit.
Yeah.
People have been there. People listening have been there,
it was
breaking up with
really,
someone and being like, but like there was nothing wrong. So I don't really know why we broke up, but I feel like something wasn't right or.
Mhm. Yeah, there wasn't really anything like majorly wrong other than like we'd been together for a few years at that point, and I found myself checking out other people when we'd go out to the bar and wondering like, what am I missing out on? Who else is out there that I don't get to experience because I'm with this person? And I was getting just kind of like frustrated, and then I was finding things that were wrong. I was finding things that were wrong with him, wrong with our relationship, all of that stuff. And so I left him. We were in New Zealand at the time, and I went to Australia. And I met a friend, and I was talking to her, and I was telling her all about how great he was. And at one point she was like, if he was so great, what are you doing here? And I said, I don't know, I guess I just have commitment issues. And she said, have you ever considered the possibility that maybe you can and do commit to things? Maybe it's monogamy that you have an issue with. And I did not even understand the question. I remember being like, what does that even mean? Mm-hmm. Because for me, like polyamory was not yet a part of my awareness. And so I just didn't even understand that there was an option outside of the monogamy paradigm. And so
you're either single or you're locked up.
Right.
Locked in with someone.
Exactly. So when she asked me that, I didn't even understand the question. And she lent me the book, The Ethical Slut. And it totally changed everything for me. I was reading it like, oh my God, we're allowed to love more than one person? Mm-hmm. And it made so much sense. But it was also like so different from anything I'd ever heard or known.
Yeah. We grow up with the idea that the ultimate accomplishment is a long-term committed relationship in monogamy. Mm-hmm. The ultimate prize. Look how much relationships and engagements and marriages are celebrated. Doesn't matter if you love them, or it doesn't matter if it's healthy, but if you get to that 10 years of marriage, there's another party waiting behind the door. Doesn't matter if you're happy.
Yeah. And I find too that also there tends to be this like the relationship escalator where like you start dating and then people start asking you when you're going to get married, then you get engaged, but when are you going to get married? Then you get married. And it's almost like the day people get married, people start asking like, when are you going to have kids? Mm-hmm. And then the next thing you know, like you started out dating and then you're married and you've got a house and you've got kids. And I think a lot of people are like, what am I doing here?
Yeah.
How did this happen?
It's a reason it's called a midlife crisis.
Yeah. 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 It's funny. My partner was telling his dad about me. Mm-hmm. And I'm 38. I've never been married, and I'm a relationship coach. And, mm-hmm. And he's telling his dad about me, and his dad says, so she's 38 years old and she's never been married and she's a relationship coach.
That doesn't make sense to him. Hey.
And he didn't quite get it. And then they like had an extended like moment mm-hmm. together of just kind of reflecting on that. Both of them have been married and divorced. Mm. And so they kind of like, there was this kind of awkward pause, and then they both laughed, and his dad was like, actually, that makes sense.
Like basically like your partner is probably similar age as you.
He's a bit older than me. Yeah.
So what's the difference? Like married and divorced or have never been married, you're both at the same point again.
Right. Exactly.
Both have lessons learned without having that marriage certificate.
Yep. Both of our parents are divorced. He's divorced. A lot of people I know are divorced. Some of the people that I know that are still married are like not necessarily happily. So I think it's actually quite rare for people to like get married and really deeply, profoundly love each other through old age. Like it does happen.
And it's
they
beautiful.
Really celebrate when it does happen. It's beautiful when it happens. Mm-hmm. But to think that everyone is supposed to do that or else they've like failed somehow. Mm-hmm. I really can't stand the way we say that a relationship has failed when it breaks up. Like one of the components of COCO relating is organic. And that's where we look to nature for inspiration in our relationship. And we would never like look to a flower that has only bloomed for a few days and tell it that it's failed just because it didn't like live as long as the old oak tree. It was never meant to.
Yeah. Or it might bloom again next season.
Right. Every time like that it'll bloom and then it will make seeds and it looks like it's died,
Mm-hmm.
but it's actually like leaving seeds and organic matter to make the soil more fertile next year.
More rich. Yeah.
Yeah.
When you read that book, Ethical Slut, and I welcome all of the audience to read that book. I will be reading it over the holidays, and I'm very excited. It's been on my to read list for a long time. What was the biggest aha moment where you felt that, someone's finally putting words to how I've always felt?
Mm-hmm. There's something in there. It's been a long time. It's probably been, gosh, almost 20 years since I read it.
Wow. Okay. Well, I'm 20 years behind you.
But let's see. There was this part about love is not like a pie where you have a certain number of slices. And when you give someone some of your love, you have less to give to other people. It's just like not really how it works. You know, if you have like for parents, and I don't have children of my own, but you know, you love all your children equally, but differently. But equally, why can't we think that the same is possible for partners?
Or why do we have to give them the entire pie?
Exactly. It's not finite. Love isn't finite. The more that we're giving and receiving, the more that we have to give and receive. The same is not true of time.
No.
You know, at least in this realm, our time is finite, and we have to make choices about where we can be at any given time. But the amount of love that we have to give, it's just like the more that we're sharing that, the more that there is to tap into.
You mentioned wandering eye. I get it. And I've talked to a lot of my friends who get it as well. And I question myself, does it come from a world where am I just unhappy in my current relationship? Or am I always wondering kind of, is there something better out there? How did you feel?
Yeah, when I was in monogamous relationships, I would wonder if there was something better out there. And then I would end up convincing myself that there must be something better out there. Like the grass is always greener on the other side. Whereas like, if I can actually, monogamy felt like a fence, and I'd be like looking over the fence, wondering what else was out there. Whereas like, sometimes if I can just hop that fence or like walk through a little path and feel the grass, often I'm like, oh, this looked nice from over there, but this isn't quite what I'm looking for. Whereas if I am like always just like looking from a distance, I will quite easily convince myself it must be better out there. In my relationship right now, we've gone through a number of kind of openings where I've been like, okay, you know, I really want to open this relationship. And then I'll download the dating apps and I see what's out there. And I'm like, actually, you know, I'm good. But it was because I was able to look and see and to realize that I'm good, that makes it much easier to stay. And there have been times that like recently I was at a music festival and this guy was being quite flirtatious with me and my partner wasn't there. And I was able to flirt with him and enjoy being with him and to know that I wasn't doing anything wrong. And it made me actually appreciate my partner so much more. Whereas if our agreements had been different and I wasn't allowed to like flirt back, I would have ended up feeling like
that you want it to more.
I wanted to be able to flirt with this person and I wasn't allowed to. And so that's when I end up finding fault in my partner, getting frustrated in the current relationship. But now when I'm like, oh my gosh, I get to flirt with this person and go home to my lover and like, I'm not doing anything wrong. I love him even more. I appreciate him even more. Just to be able to like, for me, freedom is really important. So I need to feel free to be myself. And I have like a naturally flirtatious personality. I love flirting with people. It's like, it's fun for me. It lights me up. And when I feel like I have to shut that part of myself down, there's a little piece of me that kind of like withers.
I've dated people who have really despised my very flirtatious, extroverted personality. And I felt that I was, my sparkle was dulled a little bit.
Yeah.
And I was never, I'm a very loyal person in a lot of aspects of my life. And I felt in those relationships, I felt a little controlled And it made me want to do things more because I felt that I couldn't. The same way as if you tell a child, do not eat those cookies, they all of a sudden really want the cookies.
Yeah. In going with that analogy, kids always want cookies.
Yeah. Or
but
anything that you tell them it's off limits. You
right.
wonder why, and you're more curious about it.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And that thing about like your partners really hated your flirtatious personality. I would imagine that they loved it when it was directed towards them.
Don't get me started.
Love that. As long as it's only coming my way. Like, I love this part about you as long as I get to control who gets to experience it.
Yeah.
And that's not how it works.
I like the example you brought up about the guy at the concert. And I have a question to you. So I've been the guy at the concert this year where I met someone that I would say probably one of my biggest crushes. I had 2 really big crushes in 2022, and he was definitely one of them. We met and I was like, whoa, like I have not felt this level of chemistry in a long time. Hit it off immediately. And all of a sudden, within like our first like hour of chatting, he drops the word fiance. And I was like, I deserve an Oscar for not showing anything on my face, but I felt like my heart just broke. And I felt very led on, to be honest. But then he mentioned something about, yeah, well, like we're open, we're kind of like figuring it out. And that almost for me opened a door of like, so am I allowed to date you? Am I not? Like, what are the rules here? And I don't know. It was so unclear to me. And I felt like rejected, confused, but like, I want you, but I'm not allowed. But like, he flirted with me for weeks and we talked for weeks and whatnot. We went on like a couple, not dates, but like we hung out a couple times, never ever did anything physically, but it was like, I really crushed on this guy. And it was never clear like what the rules were or how I was or wasn't allowed to be involved. And it was confusing and hurtful. And so what my suspicion is they don't even know what they're doing yet. And he's a very flirtatious person.
Yeah, so, this is super common. And this is why I think a lot of people get into a lot of trouble when they decide that they're open their relationship. They'll like agree that they're going to open it, but then they don't talk much about like, okay, what does that look like? And what exactly are we open to? And how open are we? Open to what? And if you don't have those kinds of conversations, one person's like, sweet, we're in an open relationship. They go out and like sleep with someone. And the other person's like, whoa, wait, what? And a lot of that stuff can like really surprise and trigger people. Because if you're not really clear on like, what does this look like? And how does this work? People get hurt, whether it's the people in the relationship or the person who's like flirting, like it can be really confusing. And that's why my partner and I regularly, and I really recommend that everyone does this regularly. We have regular relationship check-ins every Thursday. We get together, we go through the COCO framework, conscious, organic, committed, open. We figure out what we're committed to. We figure out what we're open to, which took a lot of time at the beginning. Now we have a couple of like year-long commitments that we're just sticking to. So that makes it a little easier. But we get together every Thursday and we talk about our desires, our fears, and our boundaries.
Okay.
And that really helps to clear a lot of stuff up. When we were opening our relationship, a lot of times people will say, okay, well, if you're going to engage sexually with someone, make sure that you're safe. Okay. Well,
what does that mean?
What does that mean? What does safety mean to you? Because everyone's definition of safety is different. So then when you get into like the nitty gritty, like what do you mean safe? What does safe look like to you? And
does that just mean protection? Does that,
Yeah. Well, and like what kind of protection? Okay. So condoms during intercourse, but what about like oral sex?
Yeah.
Some people think that giving and receiving oral sex without protection is fine. And sometimes like condoms during oral sex, dental dams, like they change the experience,
it's very also, 80s.
Yeah. But then also like, it's really important to get clear for both people on what kind of risks we're open to, what kind of boundaries we have, and those are challenging conversations to have.
Right.
But I think it's so important to at least try as much as possible to have them ahead of time. You never really know what's going to happen. So you can't plan for everything. You can't predict what might happen all the time. But the more you get used to having those kinds of conversations, the easier it is to get a rough idea of what your partner feels safe with, you know?
Is this your first partner that you've been in an open relationship with?
No.
Okay.
I've had a few at this point.
Tell me about the first experience. I feel like those are tough and awkward conversations to navigate. And because I think if someone in the relationship right now is thinking, the one thing I will say, I feel like some people open a relationship or try to open it as a way to save it. And it's like, oh God, that's a recipe for disaster. Like you're on the verge of a breakup for a multitude of other reasons. And they think opening it is going to save it. I'm like, I don't know. In my opinion, I feel like that's not the time to do it. Like, when is the time to do it? Do you start like that? Do you build that trust first?
I think it really depends.
Yeah.
So for me, like, I know, so for some people, there's like a spectrum, right? We talked about this in our last call, a spectrum of like how poly or monogamous someone is. Some people are really more naturally geared towards monogamy. It works better for them. They're more comfortable that way. Some people are more geared towards polyamory, and there's a lot of space in between.
How do you know where you are on the spectrum? You can feel it,
You can feel it, and where you are on the spectrum can change.
Yeah.
For me personally, I know that I can do monogamy for like a year or two at a time. And then I tend to be more like oriented towards polyamory. It's not so much a choice for me. I can choose monogamy for a little while, but ultimately, like, my nature is more polyamorous. And I know that about myself at this point, after like a couple of decades of trying to figure out I thought something was wrong with me.
Well, you called yourself like that you had commitment issues. So yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And now I know that this is just how I am. I really I love interacting with lots of people, and I love people. I have a really super open heart, and I don't want to tame that. I don't want to suppress that. So I knew
you shouldn't have to.
Right. I knew going into this relationship and into my last couple of relationships, like, I've known for a while, like, hey, here's something about me. So I tend to start my relationships letting people know that straight away.
Like, it's not that I want to do it right now, but this is something that I definitely lean towards. Okay, that's fair.
Yeah. I think for some people who have been in a relationship for a long time and someone is maybe realizing that they're more geared towards polyamory, opening the relationship could maybe save it.
Maybe.
Or could be the explosion that's needed to break it up.
Yeah.
I think sometimes it can save a relationship, because like I said, when I was in that other my last like monogamous relationship, I started finding things wrong with my partner and with our relationship to distract from the fact that like I wanted to see other people. I almost needed to like blame him or blame situations instead of just taking a responsibility, because at that point I didn't even know that it was an option. So I didn't have the language to take responsibility for my own needs and desires. So I think you can open an existing relationship and have it kind of save it. I do think that that's possible, but it's definitely not easy.
Yeah. There
tends to be one person in each relationship who wants polyamory more than the other. So that's something to navigate. I think it's important that everyone who's interested in open relating have a why. Why do you want to be in an open relationship? And if the only answer is so that I don't lose this person, then that's where it gets really challenging. I know for my partner and I, my why is that like I'm oriented this way. Like this feels
more natural to you.
How I am. My partner's more geared towards monogamy. And so I was asking him, like, what is your why? Why do you want to be in an open relationship? And at first he didn't have an answer. So a couple of weeks later at our next relationship meeting, he was able to articulate that he wants to learn, that he feels like he has a lot to learn here. My partner is like, he's brilliant. He's really incredibly intelligent. And he feels like there's like a whole realm of information and knowledge that he is unaware of. So he wants to learn about how to do it. And he can see that there is a lot of potential for his personal growth through our relationship and through opening the relationship. He, like so many of us, I think it's fair to say we basically all have codependent patterns somewhere here or there.
Yes.
And because that's how most of our parents were raised, and that's how they raised.
I go back and forth. My spectrum is codependency or polyamory. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know it. I don't even know I don't even think it's a spectrum. I feel like it's just two options.
Okay.
So let's talk about my abandonment issues. Just kidding.
I will say that in going back to this organic relationship piece and looking to nature for inspiration in our attachment styles, when we're like outside and we see a seed like drifting by on the breeze, we don't look at that seed and be like, oh my gosh, it's so flighty. That is like such an avoidant seed there. That's just how that seed does its thing, right? And when we walk through like, some burrs that get stuck to our clothes, those are like the more like anxious attachers, right? They cling on. We can either be like, we do sometimes like, oh, these are so annoying, but if you don't like clingy seeds, then stop walking through them.
Yeah.
So I think often like in nature, we see everywhere that the seeds spread in all different ways, and there aren't ways that are right or wrong. They're just different. And same for our attachment styles. I think a lot of us can, once we start learning about attachment styles, we can either shame ourselves or shame each other for the attachment styles that we have. Or we can just recognize that like we are part of nature too, and it's okay that our attachment styles are different, and working with it instead of trying to like change it. If that makes sense.
And evolving it in whatever way you can.
Yeah, exactly.
And understanding it, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. So my partner decided that there was a lot for him to learn here, both about himself and about just like how to be in relationships. So he came up with a why that wasn't like, well, because I love you and you're this way, so I guess I have to put up with it. Because I was saying like, if you don't have your own why, I don't want to drag you through this.
That's not fair. And it's not going to be productive.
Right. So I think if both people or all people, depending on how many people are involved, if everyone has their own personal, like why I want to do this, then opening an existing relationship can help. But again, like making sure to check in about like, what are we open to, and like letting the opening be gradual. There have been a number of like slow openings in my relationship where there was a part of me that, like early on, we agreed we were going to open up the relationship. There was this part of me that felt kind of like juvenile, but also whatever, that wanted to like just go out to the bar and find someone and like,
like immediately.
Yeah, exactly. Like I'm free and like go for it. But I didn't do that. Partially because I've already let myself have a super slutty phase where I slept with half of Australia and it was fun. And not really, not half, but like.
But from what you were coming from, a very committed monogamous relationship, it probably felt that way to you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, you felt wild and free.
Exactly. I had read The Ethical Slut and I was like, wait a minute, I get to be slutty and a good person at the same time. And so I went for it. And I told everybody that I was with, look, this is who I am. This is where I'm at right now. And that was fine. That was cool, And I think for a lot of people who have been either like, peering over that fence, wondering what it's like over there, when you get the go ahead, there is this tendency to want to like run out there and experience everything that you haven't been able to for a while. And I understand and honor that. And it's so important to be really regularly checking in with your partner. And
yourself.
Yeah. And yourself, spending time alone. Like, why do I want to be out there? What else? Because sometimes, in the same ways that we work hard to avoid ourselves, we can also date lots of people to avoid ourselves. There's a lot of ways to avoid ourselves.
That's literally what I wanted to ask you about next. I loved when we chatted the last time. You brought up such a great concept of, you said some people use polyamory as a way to avoid. And I was like, the bell just went off for me, the light bulb. And I was like, oh, that's an interesting thought. So I'd love to get your take on that.
Yeah. I traveled all over and I eventually ended up in this island in Thailand where a lot of people were into like Tantra and sacred sexuality. And there it was almost like more.
What does that
normal.
mean for people who are wondering what that is? Tantra and sacred sexuality. What does that mean?
Okay, good question.
I know what it is briefly, but if I only briefly know about it, I can guarantee you the listeners don't.
Okay, so Tantra is actually an ancient Eastern, it's a whole philosophy.
Okay.
That is about being with all of life. It's about finding balance between the masculine and the feminine, the yin and the yang, the light and the dark, and honoring and loving all of it. It actually, when you look at the tantric texts, very, very little of it has anything to do with sexuality. So it's an entire whole like broad philosophy about the whole universe with a little tiny bit about sex in it.
Okay.
In their sacred texts. But we in the West are so hungry for any sort of like religion or philosophy that incorporates healthy sexuality. I think we've kind of like glommed onto that. And so for a lot of people, we think of like a lot of people here in the US and in more Western places, we think of Tantra as being about sex, which it's not really, but it is a religious philosophy that does incorporate just a healthy view of sexuality where it's like acknowledges that it exists and can be good.
Yeah.
And
every other religion shames you about having sex.
Right. All the Abrahamic religions shame sexuality really strictly. So just to have it acknowledged as healthy. So we in the West have kind of really taken to that. Yeah. And sacred sexuality is really about acknowledging the sacredness in ourselves and in our own sexuality, and in acknowledging the ways that our sexuality can actually bring us closer to spirit. And that our sexuality, when integrated, can unite us with the divine. It's not, we've been taught that it separates us and that it's sinful and all of that, but sacred sexuality really is about reclaiming the sacredness of our sexuality, and in even being able to use that as a way to get closer to the divine through our own bodies.
Okay.
So I'd moved to this place in Thailand where that was like normal, and that was
the big thing. Like that was the main focus.
Now there's always there's always a shadow side to everything, right? So actually there was this like yoga school there that had been well known for a long time for having a tantric teachers and things. And then since then it's kind of blown up, and it turns out that like, the main guru Swami was actually like abusing people. And
I heard about that.
So beware, to everyone listening, beware of people who say that. Just know that there is always a shadow, and to really trust yourself. And if you are wanting to dive into sacred sexuality and you find a teacher and there's something in you that's like, I don't know about this, slower is better. And no one outside of you can heal you. No one outside of you can heal you. They can hold a space for you to heal yourself. But if someone is rushing you and telling you that, a certain chakra is blocked and they're going to get in there and help you.
Trust your intuition.
That can be done with breath work.
Yeah.
That doesn't need someone else's phallus.
Exactly.
Yes. But anyway, I was on this island where all of a sudden, and I was coming from like Midwestern America, where polyamory was unheard of and monogamy was like the only way. And then I went to this place where polyamory was really like celebrated and well known. And what I found there is that people tend to almost like look down on people who are monogamous. And I actually went through a phase of this myself because I felt so brainwashed by monogamy culture that when I discovered polyamory, it was kind of like, I felt like monogamy is a lie and what a bunch of bullshit. And so then I kind of wanted to like tear it down. And I didn't believe that anyone was really happy being monogamous.
Right. You started questioning everything.
Right. I was questioning everything, which was true for me. But I've since come like kind of full circle and I realized that there's a full spectrum and that some people really are more comfortable, more geared towards monogamy. And it does really work better for some people. And so I find that sometimes in like polyamory circles, I find people kind of like looking down on monogamous people for being less evolved. Oh, it must be because you're jealous, or it must be because, you should go
work on yourself and figure out that.
you're obviously insecure if you can't like share your boyfriend with 3 other women or whatever it is. You know, there's like, anytime anyone is shaming other people and saying this can't be true for you,
run away.
Yeah. Like, because only each individual can really like come to what is right for them. And that's not even necessarily like what's right for them for a lifetime. You know, we go through different seasons and cycles, and sometimes monogamy is just easier. So even sometimes people who are naturally more polyamorous, they might have young kids, or, you know, a pandemic breaks out or whatever it is. And sometimes even for more naturally polyamorous people, monogamy can be easier sometimes, you know, and then even sometimes for more monogamous people, polyamory just kind of works sometimes. I have a friend who's more geared towards monogamy, but she met and had a really nice connection with a man who was married, and it was all very above board and clearly communicated. And so it's really like, there's a lot of ebb and flow to it.
There is, trust me. I think there's a lot of fear, but I think there's a lot of curiosity and education to be had. That's why I want to start with reading the book Ethical Slut. And then you mentioned another book last time about Polysecure. Yeah. Do you recommend reading those back to back, or do you recommend Polysecure once you're kind of, okay, I want to actually explore polyamory?
I actually recommend that everyone read Polysecure, whether or not you even want to explore polyamory, because there's just a lot of really great material in there about attachment styles, communication. It's great. Even if you are like, no, I'm good with monogamy.
It's good to know.
I think it's a great book.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. There's a lot in there about communication and attachment styles that can be helpful even within monogamous relationships.
I really want to touch on how exploring polyamory and obviously your own framework of COCO, how has that changed you? Like, what have you learned about yourself? And how do you feel like your life is better now? And you're like, where do I begin?
Yeah.
Or even the other side where it's like any fears that got brought up, even though this was something that you wanted to explore, whatever path you want to take.
Well, first of all, when I first like discovered the possibility of polyamory, it like totally like changed the way I saw the world, changed the way I knew I wanted to move through the world. It was suddenly like, oh my gosh, these dreams that I thought I had, because for the first 20 some years of my life, wanted to grow up and get married and do the thing that everybody does. And then all of a sudden it was like, whoa, there's other options. And then I've gone through quite a few waves of like, I really wanted to have a baby for a while, but I wanted to find someone who was open to polyamory. And I wanted to be here in Northern Michigan, which is a pretty conservative place.
Yeah.
And this was years ago, but I was looking for someone who would be open to polyamory and wanted to have a family. And that was,
you're like, there's a unicorn out there. I will find you.
It just like was not really happening. And so I've actually gone through different phases of like doubting myself and whether or not I would be able to find someone who would be open to that. Then for a little while there, I was like, all right, I'm going to have a baby. And if I can't find someone to do it with me, I'll just do it by myself. But I don't want to have a baby by myself. I want a whole community.
A lot of work.
Yeah.
It almost reiterates your need for polyamory. You want more people involved.
Yeah. Even when I see people like partners doing it together, it's like often too much for 2 people.
Yes.
We need like, even
you need a village.
Not polyamorous, like we need villages. Exactly. We kind of like have lost that a little bit. We need to get back to that. Yeah. So I've gone through a few different iterations of like wondering whether all these things were possible for me. And then right now I really feel like I've come around to like, this is possible for me. I'm going to make this work for me. Actually, I had kind of an embarrassing moment. My partner came over. My partner actually lives a couple doors down.
Okay, perfect.
So
I love that.
I live by myself, but he lives, he's my next door neighbor.
I like that.
We were going through a phase where like, he was being challenged by what was coming up. And he came over and he was actually still outside, but he saw me and I was looking in the mirror and I was like, basically like giving myself a pep talk. This gets to work for me. This gets to work for me. This works for me. And I was like, kind of like shouting
You
at
were
myself
talking
in
it
the
to an
mirror.
existence.
Yeah, because I haven't like, I've done enough of wondering whether or not this is going to work for me. And so I was like kind of shouting at myself in the mirror, this gets to work for me. And then I saw him at the window and I got kind of embarrassed because there I was like talking to myself, you know, quite like passionately too. I was not like mumbling to myself. I was really going for it. And I feel like finally now I'm in a place where I really do believe that this not only gets to work for me, but like it is working for me. It is working for me. I found a man who can stand by me and is like keeps showing up. And I don't know if he's going to be my like forever partner, but I do know.
And you don't need to know that right now.
Exactly. I do know. And the thing is like, nobody knows. Like, I hate to bring this up, but like people die all the time.
And just because you're married doesn't mean like it's locked down for life.
Exactly. I think it's wise in any relationship to always remember that like it could end at any time. And none of us are like really super safe, because that's not, life never guarantees us that. But we do get to keep showing up for each other. We do get to keep insisting to ourselves and to the universe that the things that are most important to us get to work for us. And I think I'm finally to a place where I'm seeing that like, yeah, this does get to work for me.
That's a nice feeling.
Yeah, it is really great. And it's cool because I'm now back in Northern Michigan, and I host these monthly COCO Relationship meetings for anyone in Northern Michigan. They're the second Tuesday of every month. And I'm now holding space in the community for people, because this is a really judgmental place.
I was just going to say, I'm sure people got lots to talk about.
I will sometimes like there's some Facebook groups for like the general, just like what's going on in Traverse City. And I will post in there about these meetings, and oh my gosh, people come out of the woodwork to tell me how I should be ashamed of myself, to tell me about how it's so disgusting. And they're like, oh, sounds like there's a swinger party at the yoga club.
There is, and you're welcome.
Well, there's not. I'm going to build a temple, and there will definitely be temple nights at the temple, but we're not there yet. At the yoga club, we just sit around fully dressed so far. But people have so much judgment.
Yeah.
And I remember
so
when
much
I was
shame to give you.
Yes. And when I was younger, I used to take a lot of that on and either like feel ashamed and hide, or feel the need to like fight back and prove to them why they're wrong and blah, blah, blah. But I notice now I'm just kind of like, okay, you can believe that. I'm glad you're happy in your marriage. Congratulations. This meeting obviously isn't for you. Yeah. You know, everybody gets to live however they want. It's the judgments of other people that are like, come on, it's really not necessary. If you're happy in your relationship, fine. But if you're really that happy in your relationship, then why do you need to attack me so like passionately? If you're so happy in your relationship, why don't you just go spend time with your husband instead of like picking fights with some random woman on the internet? You know,
the people who have the most judgment and a lot of the anger, you got to wonder, it's like, I think you want to be part of this. You know what I mean? Like the most opinionated people, I'm like, well, you've thought a lot about this if you have this many opinions.
Right.
The people who don't actually care don't even notice that post.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
People are funny.
People are hilarious. Yeah.
Last question for you. I want you to talk a little bit more about the COCO framework. You just alluded to it bits. If people are interested, can they join you online and like learn from you that way?
Yeah, I have a little Facebook group.
Cool.
I think it's called COCO Nuts. I've started a book.
Yeah. What are you manifesting? Bring us back to the beginning of the conversation. You said you're manifesting, so maybe this relates.
Yeah, I'm manifesting a lot of things.
Yeah.
One of them is a book on COCO relating. It stands for Conscious, Organic, Committed, Open. Conscious meaning like awareness, where we are aware of a few things. Firstly, that our relationships with ourselves are the most important relationships that we have. And no amount of other relationships is gonna, you know, substitute for a strong and healthy relationship with ourselves. Also that like we're aware that what we're experiencing, our emotions, our triggers, all those things are like our responsibility. and not putting all of that onto other people to take care of our needs. Our boundaries are our own responsibilities. So the conscious part is about the awareness that really of what is our own responsibility within relationship, and remembering that every relationship that we have is a mirror somehow for ourselves. The things we like in other people is something that we see that we like about ourselves. The things we don't like is something that we don't like about ourselves. Right. So just being aware of that is the first tenet of COCO. And then organic, again, is looking to nature for inspiration in our relationships.
I love that one.
That is we talked about the seeds and things dying and not being like a failure. Everything in nature eventually dies. And so do all of our relationships. And that's okay. Also, like in nature, nothing really grows in nice, neat little rows. And I think so many of us, like
our society wants us to do that though.
Right. Like we tried it. We grow our vegetables in the same way that we grow our children in like nice, neat little rows.
I know.
And it's not like that. Like we're so much more wild than that. And like
the wildflowers are way more beautiful than the lined up perfect rows.
Right. Well, and like, yeah.
There's a place for both, for sure.
There is a place for both. And just like allowing people to grow wherever they are, and to, you know, and also in nature and in our relationships, they're not always perfectly symmetrical. You know, sometimes when we have to grow towards the light in a certain way, or like, you know, a storm comes and breaks off a limb. And so things get kind of like gnarly, but they're actually still thriving.
Yes.
You know,
and they learn to grow in different ways.
Yeah. Also in nature, like some plants need a lot of water. Some plants would drown in that much water. Some plants need a lot of sun. Other plants would burn up in that much sun. So just remembering that we all have different needs, and we don't shame the plants for like needing more water, but we sometimes shame humans for having needs.
Yeah.
Either shaming other people or shaming ourselves. And just really remembering that we're all allowed to have the needs that we have, and we're allowed to get them met in whatever ways we need to. And it's all okay. And really just like allowing the beauty and diversity of nature to be reflected in the beauty and diversity of our relationships. Yeah. And then committed and open. A lot of times people think of committed relationships and open relationships as like opposite types of relating. You are either in a committed relationship or you're in an open relationship.
Yep.
And in COCO relationships, right. But actually, like right now, I am in a committed open relationship. We have commitments and we are open. It's important to get clear on what we're committed to and what we're open to. And also to have those things kind of be like time bound, like this whole, like forever and ever till death do us part. How about we just like make a commitment for the next year?
Yeah. And see how that goes.
And how about, you know, instead of like, we're in an open relationship, like, well, open to what? You know, and actually it's also about acknowledging that we're all in open relationships. None of us live in a bubble.
No.
So even if you are in a sexually monogamous relationship, you can still be open to the truth of your partner. You can still be open to the fact that they're going to be having conversations with other people.
They have coworkers, they have friends, they go out to bars with their friends and meet people. And
right. I would love to see like this kind of like revolution where all of a sudden everybody, even sexually monogamous people, are like, yeah, our relationship is open because we are open to the truth of each other.
Yeah.
We're open to the fact that, you know, we're communal beings. So we're sexually monogamous, but we're open. We're open to hearing from each other. We're open to the fact that, you know, he likes to walk in the park and she likes to do pottery, and we're open to the fact that we can do that differently. You know, we don't have to do everything together. So yeah, so in COCO relationships, we're committed and open. It's not a either or kind of thing.
I love it. I've learned so much talking to you today, like so much. Like I said at the beginning of this podcast, when I've wanted to talk about polyamory for so long. Ethical Slut has been a book on my to read list for a long time. And I feel like you've finally given me the nudge to be like, go learn more. And for anyone who's listening to this, if the idea of polyamory even just piqued your curiosity to just understand the world more and other people more and not be so judgmental, I highly encourage you to learn a bit more about Katie's framework and read these books and, I don't know, just not live a life full of judgment like we all tend to do. So Katie, any last words for someone that is maybe curious like you were 2 decades ago?
I think it's important to be curious and to be open. And just because you're curious and open to learning more about something doesn't necessarily mean that you're like about to dive in headfirst into something that scares you. You know, we can be curious about a lot of things and they don't need to define us. Yeah. So I say, if you're curious, follow that. Not just in polyamory, but like in life, whatever you're curious about, like allow yourself to explore, because that's what we're here for.
Yeah. And we only live one life on earth, in my opinion.
Yeah, that we know of.
Yeah. As of right now, I'm like, I feel like a lot of people, especially my age, I'm turning 30 next year. I feel like a lot of people still live their life like a dress rehearsal. And I'm like, oh my God, no. This is it. Like, for what we know, you have to just go for it.
I think it's important to like go for it when you're feeling curious and inspired. And then also, I think it's important to really just let ourselves rest.
Yes.
And to like just now, when you were, for the listeners, when you're listening, if you're hearing like, oh shit, I'm living like a dress rehearsal, and you're feeling all kinds of shame all over yourself, like, it's also okay to like not go for it. It's also okay to just chill sometimes, you know,
and just not react. Sit about, with what we just said.
Right. It's all about what you're needing in the moment. It's all about, you know, really tuning into yourself and your own inner truth. And sometimes there will be a curiosity there that really wants to be explored. And sometimes there will be an exhaustion there that really wants to just be rested back into, and really just like following what is true for you. Yeah.
People trying that on for size is a whole new paradigm.
Yeah.
Doing what they want, that's crazy for some people. Like insane. Katie, where can everyone find you when they want to connect with you?
I have a website that I'm going to be updating soon. It's there for now.
It looks good.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks. There's actually a lot more coming.
Okay, cool.
My laptop went on the fritz a little while ago, so I'm getting a new one for Christmas, so there will be an update there too.
I just bought a new one yesterday, so it's exciting.
Nice. Yeah. Feels like it's time for some upgrades around here. So Katie Mazing, KATIEMAEZING.com. And that's also my Instagram handle. And that's also how you can find me on Facebook.
Such a cool username.
Thanks. My friends came up with that, actually. Yeah, it's pretty brilliant.
I was reading it Katie Mae Zing, and it only until this very moment when you said it, I was like, oh, that makes way more sense. And at one point I was like, is her last name Zing? That's a cool last name. But then I was like, no, I know her last name. So it's literally in this moment that makes total sense to me now. And I love it. It's good. Katie, thank you so much for coming on. I know we only connected like not even a month ago, but this was a conversation I knew this podcast needed to have. So thank you so much.
Yeah, it's been a real pleasure. Thank you for having me.